Let's get started. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's CGIAR-WFP policy seminar on learning support for a multi-country climate resilience program for food security. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Mulugeta Bayeh. I'm the manager of web communications at IFPRI. Will be the moderator. This virtual event aims to share findings from a research partnership among CGIAR, the World Food Programme WFP, and the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, Norad. As you probably saw in the program, today's 90-minute session will feature a series of remarks, presentations by an impressive lineup of experts from all three institutions, including an overview of the research partnership, its significant contribution to food security and climate resilience across 14 sub-Saharan African countries. Also includes highlights of selected projects and findings, followed by a panel discussion of experts from several African countries. We have also time for Q&A. You may submit your questions on the chat function on ifpri.org by posting on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or by using the hashtag AskIFPRI on X. It's now my great pleasure to welcome our three keynote speakers for their opening remarks. First, Swinnen, Director General of IFPRI and Managing Director Systems Transformation CGIAR, followed by Arif Husain, Chief Economist and Director of Analysis, Planning and Performance, WFP, and finally Daniel van Gilst, Senior Agriculture Advisor, Norad. Over to you, Jo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mulugeta, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being with us here in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. This is a virtual IFPRI's policy seminar, and we're here to discuss lessons learned from an important recent collaboration between IFPRI, CGIAR more broadly, the World Food Programme and the Norwegian government through Norad, the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation. The learning support for a multi-country climate resilient program for food security, this project started in 2023, and it aims to enhance food security and climate resilience across 13 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The project was launched at a vital time. As you all know, food security has worsened in many of the countries in the world, and conflict has played a very important role in this. Many countries in sub-Saharan Africa now face a compounding set of crises. And according to the recent global report on food crisis, almost 300 million people are facing acute food crises or very high levels of food insecurity in 2023. And this number has continued to go up over the past decade, and it's a very alarming heights now. And the fact that it kept going up or keeps going up is really very concerning. Conflict is now a leading driver of food insecurity and a major driver of poverty in Africa. Conflict has always been an important driver of food insecurity, but particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, it has basically grown, and the food insecurity and the poverty problem associated with it have worsened significantly. Often these conflicts are interrelated with climate shocks and with droughts, floods, and other events which affect both the consumption side and the production side of the food system. The rising number of people in need of urgent assistance as a consequence has stretched the global humanitarian resources and responses. And simply put, humanitarian funding is not keeping pace with the needs that we are all facing. And so in this context of increasing crises and the constrained humanitarian resources, there's a critical need for assessments for science. High-quality research and analysis can help improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of responses to these challenges. Effective crisis responses requires learning and testing and evaluation of alternative interventions. And clearly, the analysis are more relevant or more effective also if this is based on a collaboration of different partners, different stakeholders. In particularly in this case, if we can work with implementing partners such as the WFP and the technical, the knowledge partners like the CGIAR. So this project is very much based on this logic, and CGIAR researchers have provided research and analytical support to inform the design and the delivery of World Food Programme programs in these vulnerable countries. And the partnership between CGIAR and WFP has been extremely valuable and has been generously supported by the Norwegian government. Within the CGIAR, it also is associated and supported by a number of CGIAR research initiatives within the portfolio, the research portfolio, and including 2 research initiatives that are important, the Fragility, Conflict and Migration Initiative and the Seed Equal initiative. You will hear examples, cases discussed today in the presentation from several colleagues based on the analyses that have been done in different countries. I would like to also emphasize that the project that we are referring to and we will hear about today fits in a long-standing partnership between the CGIAR and the World Food Programme. This long-standing partnership has been formalized through a memorandum of understanding signed several years ago and continuing right now. Our partnership has allowed to create a joint research agenda that addresses both the World Food Programme's priorities and to fill key knowledge and evidence gaps. So in this way, we can stay responsive to emerging challenges on the ground as they are identified by WFP country offices and their operational experience. And some of the evidence has also shed light on the effectiveness of the WFP's interventions, whether this is anticipatory action or emergency responses. And we certainly hope that this will help WFP to design better and more resilient programs which are so much needed in the world today. So I'm very impressed by the creative and the adaptable model that has emerged because of this partnership. And I very much commend the commitment of the World Food Programme team, and especially Arif Husain's team and his colleagues. And of course, we are very grateful for the support of the Norwegian government and Norad, and especially Daniel van Gilst, who is with us today here as well in his team. So I can hope very much that we can leverage the mutual respect and the shared goals which have been established through this trilateral collaboration. And we are also eager to see these activities continue within the CGIAR as part of the new portfolio that we have designed for the 2025-2030 portfolio. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to pass the floor to my colleagues, and I look forward to what promises to be a very lively discussion and insightful set of results. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Yo. It's really a pleasure to be here. And let me just start by saying that we are really proud of this partnership with CGIAR and also the support we are getting from Norad to deliver on something as important as food security and climate resilience, and in Africa and in almost 14 countries. I just wanted to not repeat what you has said in terms of the need which is out there, whether it is on conflict, whether it's on climate, whether it's on the continuous destitution of people in terms of acute hunger. But I also wanted to say a little bit about what are the lessons which we have already learned out of this research. What are the main things which we are seeing coming out of this research, which makes it so important for an organization like World Food Programme. First and foremost, it's about problem analysis matters, because getting the problem right is crucial if we want to have effective and transformative solutions. This is where the analysis comes in. Second, it is really important for both to jointly set priorities, and not after the program, but on the very first day. This means that our research and interventions must align closely with the real needs on the ground. In that way, we can ensure the relevance and the impact of of results, basically. Third, we believe that we need to integrate research and evaluation directly into our programming or into our delivery. This is not like, learn as you go, but learn while you're doing. And what that allows us to do is then that you're quick in terms of making adjustments, changing as and when necessary. One necessary condition for this is flexibility in partnership. Why? Because rigid frameworks don't allow us to change, but in our world right now, this change is essential. Fourth, I think it is about staying local and really understanding the context. Some people say, it's a saying, it's about us, but not without us. I think it's very real. Because if you want to develop the best solutions, if you want to have these sustainable solutions which actually work, then you need the collaboration of the local partners. And this is one thing which this project provides. And when we are tailoring our approaches to local contexts, they are essentially owned by the local people, which then increases their value, relevance, and sustainability. The fifth thing which is important for us is basically to look at the linkages. We all say, people right now, they are affected by conflict, people are getting affected by climate, and one of the consequences of the two is displacement. Internal displacement at about 120 million people is the most we have ever seen. Now, climate research, climate is really important in that sense, or the climate shocks are really important in that sense, because climate shocks know no borders. So if we are going to be dealing with that, we need to make approaches which are essentially interconnected in terms of even solving these problems. So it cannot be a siloed approach when we are dealing with these issues, when it comes to conflict, when it comes to climate, and frankly, also about the displacement which results from this. We already said something about empowerment of communities, but as climate knows no borders, our solutions should be such that they know no borders. So yes, communities involved in making this, first addressing the problem, implementing the solution, but for many of these things which are cross-border, we need to have regional approaches. So it cannot be just one, need to deal with countries, need to deal with regions, and then obviously need to deal with the globe. And to me, the very final thing here is that one outcome which we see is that on one side, we need to prioritize climate financing, but on the other side, we have to also deal with helping countries which are hosting these refugees. And most of these countries are in the global south. And what we are seeing over there is that in a way, these countries have the least climate impact, but they have the highest cost. And not only in terms of climate, but also in terms of displacement of people who are coming to them. So this is something which is again tackled through the research we are talking about. In summary, let me just finish by saying that, this research program, it demonstrates that when researchers and implementers come together to analyze, to generate, and to apply evidence in real time, we create adaptable and impactful partnerships capable of addressing most of the urgent challenges that we see today. That's the beauty of this work, the details of which you're going to be hearing soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us to make some introductory remarks. It has been a pleasure following the development and the implementation of this program. we look forward to listening in on the activities and the latest findings the CGIAR and the WFP have been engaged in. Last year, in 2023, our Parliament allocated emergency support to countries and regions being affected by the war in Ukraine. These funds were a one-off donation in 2023 and would be finished in the course of 2024. A 1 to 2 year window of support, almost unfortunately. But when it comes to emergency support, our go-to approach has been to contact the organizations like the WFP, FAO, and maybe OCHA. But this time, however, we also asked the CGIAR, an agriculture research group consisting of 15 international agriculture policy research centers, agriculture and policy research centers, and WFP to cooperate and work together in areas WFP is operating, and include a research component into the emergency work, hopefully combining the experience and knowledge of the two competent institutions, and hopefully resulting in some learning points which could improve our approach to different types of emergencies. This type of agreement supports the cooperation agreement the CGIAR and WFP has already embarked in and talked about earlier. This collaboration between CGIAR and the World Food Programme and the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, Norad, has 3 pillars: scaling disaster risk financing, transforming food systems with sustainable school meals and clean cooking, and supporting smallholder farmers. This work leverages CGIAR's experience with strategic program support. It leverages the CG's experience with impact evaluations and knowledge product development. The program drew on 2 of the CGIAR's initiatives, namely, and also mentioned by Joe earlier, the CGIAR's Fragility, Conflict and Migration Initiative, the FCM, and the Seed Equal Initiative. CGIARs and WFP put together a comprehensive activity and research portfolio. The activities of this program include strategic reviews, resilience assessments, and evaluations of WFP nutritional and crisis resilience interventions. It was not always easy, but all in all, given the size of the project portfolio and the time needed for effective implementation and dissemination, the project has been implemented effectively, giving us a complete set of studies, enabling good dissemination and outreach, including to synthesize lessons from across Norway-funded portfolio and share them with our partners. Some of the outcomes of these studies and assessments will be presented to you here today. So regarding the publications and journal articles, the project is compiling a brief report of the project outputs. This report will include the list of all publications, including discussion papers and journal articles, with a link to be able to access them. If this is of interest, of course, this will be made available to all. So, but now, just going back to the whole thing and not wasting more time, and I look forward to hearing and learning more about learning support for a multi-country climate resilience program for food security. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you so much again, Arif and Daniel. We'll now delve deeper into overviews of the research partnership and specific research projects and their findings, and introduce the next set of speakers. Daniel Gilligan, Unit Director of Poverty, Gender and Inclusion at IFPRI, will kick us off with an overview of CGIAR-WFP activities funded by Norway, immediately followed by our panel of experts who will each share insights on selected research projects and findings. Jessica Leight and Alan de Brauw, both Senior Research Fellows at IFPRI, Peter Läderach, Program Leader at ABC, and Wolde Mekuria, Senior Researcher at IWMI. Please join me in welcoming our speakers, Dan, Jessica, Alan, Peter, Wolde, who each have 5 minutes in that order. Dan, over to you.
Mulugeta, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the entire project team at the CGIAR. And I want to thank again Daniel van Gilst and Arif Husain and Swinnen for their remarks this morning. And this partnership has just been incredibly effective. So yeah, looking forward to sharing a bit of an overview of what we've achieved over the last 15 months. Next slide, please. So I want to start by just talking about the ongoing kind of partnership and relationship between the CGIAR and the World Food Program. This has actually been a very long-standing partnership. It's very rich across the 14 CGIAR research centers and World Food Program, which has a massive coverage of rural areas and their needs. There's been a great deal of collaboration. This has been formalized in a memorandum of understanding that's existed since 2012 and been re-signed each time under the latest executive director of World Food Program. So just demonstrating again the continued commitment. The focus of this collaboration has been quite broad, but includes the main focus of de-risking food systems under changing climate, a focus on climate and security, an important emergent area of work, and then risk-informed development, which is a model that WFP has really piloted and brings in across all of their programming. The modalities of collaboration have included individual research projects on program effectiveness, including impact evaluation and cost effectiveness studies, secondments of CGIAR research staff into WFP program and regional offices, and in Rome, a large number of co-organized events and also the Food System Summit coalitions. There's a substantial alignment between the two institutions. So why partner? Both organizations have a common vision of a world without hunger and really a commitment to evidence-based decision-making. I've seen this on the ground myself working with World Food Program. They really want to learn from research. They really want to have that evidence to make their decisions. So that helps WFP leverage CGIAR system expertise and evidence generation, and the CGIAR benefits from leveraging WFP's extensive field presence and implementation capacity. Next slide, please. Just a brief overview of the project. You've already heard quite a bit, so but I'll just mention that in terms of the funding modality, Norad worked separately with World Food Program and the CGIAR to develop the contracts for this work so that both maintained independence, but we actually worked very closely together to build out this program. So the focus was on strategic support to WFP program design, making sure that we had complementary analysis and development of knowledge products, evidence on the impact of WFP programs through impact evaluations. Despite the short time frame, we were able to put together a number of high-quality impact evaluations, and then technical and scientific capacity sharing and knowledge exchanges. And this has been done across the three pillars that have already been mentioned, so I'll come back to those with more detail in a moment. Next slide, please. Just in terms of scope, activities, and geographies, so the work here really worked very intensively across different nodes at World Food Program, from headquarters to regional bureaus and country offices. Again, we've noted that the CGIAR teams involved two CGIAR research initiatives and substantial work across 5 research centers. We worked closely with implementing governments and also implementing partners in these 13 countries that you see here. So the map shows the 13 countries in which this work took place, and also the number of studies done in each country. So this was really an ambitious project. We undertook a total of 27 different research activities in a period of only 15 months. Next slide, please. So here I'm just going to briefly show you in 3 slides for each pillar, each of the studies that was conducted, and give you a sense of the breadth of what was done. So the first pillar was on scaling up disaster risk financing. A number of really interesting studies here. 2 of those looked at targeting strategies. The one by Jordan Kyle looked at how local government decision makers make decisions about targeting. Similarly, in Ethiopia, the work led by Gush Burhanu looked at testing different targeting strategies under different targeting rules. Alan de Brauw's work, which will be featured momentarily, covered anticipatory action, which is an area where WFP really leads in trying to actually test these approaches of better anticipation of upcoming climate shock events. Next slide, please. The second pillar was on transforming food systems through sustainable school meals and clean cooking. So we had really substantial input here from SIP and from IFPRI and the Alliance for Bioversity and CIAT, with work across Malawi, Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania. And for the SIP work, so they really worked on supporting local farmers on biofortified crops, specifically orange, sweet potato, and high iron beans, to help develop the local agricultural economy, but so that those could be used to support school meal programs locally. This approach to homegrown school feeding is really the leading edge of the approach on school meals. Next slide, please. So pillar 3 was on supporting smallholder farmers to build production and livelihood resilience. Again, a great deal of work done here. The first 2 studies here are systematic literature reviews to provide rapid evidence that WFP could use immediately. Interesting work led by Kate Ambler on evaluation of subsidies for agricultural input bundles. Again, an important component of WFP support. Next slide. So yes, Daniel mentioned, and I appreciate that, some of the publications coming from this. We've had a series of briefs and blogs, some discussion papers, and a number of articles under submission at journals. Given the fast pace of this project and the time that it takes to publish research, we're going to be able to enjoy the fruits of this for some time as a number of these research papers actually come out in journals. Next slide, please. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight here a couple of the events that we've had to make sure that we are getting out the evidence on this, including one in Nairobi in February of this year, and then in May when we joined an ongoing conference on research and policy in Ethiopia. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much. And I will pass now to Jessica Leight.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Jessica Leight. I'm a senior research fellow in the Poverty, Gender, and Inclusion Unit in IFPRI, and I will be presenting evidence from the review we conducted, the effects of cash and cash plus interventions on livelihoods outcomes, a systematic review and meta-analysis. Next slide, please. The motivation for this project, I think, will be familiar to many in this audience. Cash transfer programs have become a mainstream policy tool used by a wide range of partners to address poverty and food insecurity in many contexts, including, of course, fragile contexts. That being said, using cash transfers to generate a sustainable exit from poverty that persists following the conclusion of the transfer itself remains challenging. Given this challenge, Cash Plus programs combine cash transfers with livelihoods interventions in order to increase the probability of long-term poverty exit. This might be particularly challenging in fragile settings if the complementary conditions for livelihoods interventions are not available, but might also be particularly promising given an urgent need for more sustainable program effects. Next slide, please. Our aim in this project was to provide a systematic overview and meta-analysis of the effects of both cash transfers and cash plus interventions on livelihoods outcomes, or more specifically, income at the household level, consumption at the household level, and labor force participation. The cash literature is extremely large. There's a wide range of evidence generated by research partners, both in universities, at institutions like IFPRI, at institutions like WFP. Given this large body of evidence, we argue that meta-analytic estimates can be more informative than estimates from a single trial because they can inform key stakeholders not about just the effects in a single project or a single context, but the average effect across a range of contexts. Next slide, please. The geography of evidence that we identified is summarized here. You can see that there's evidence in this literature from across the world that includes some middle-income countries such as Mexico, the site of a very early successful cash transfer program, Progressa. That's the most common site, but we also see large numbers of studies from across Sub-Saharan Africa as well as Asia. There was, however, a notably relatively limited evidence in fragile or conflict-affected settings. We identified only 13 out of roughly 100 studies that were conducted in a setting identified as fragile using the World Bank classification. And of these, only 2 would be plausibly considered to be in a setting of open conflict. Next slide, please. We included in our review a range of cash interventions that includes conditional cash transfers, summarized CCT, unconditional or summarized UCT, and interventions that include both a cash transfer, whether conditional and unconditional, and supplementary interventions that often could be training, savings groups, behavioral change, communication, etc. You can see here this timeline summarizes the starting year of each evaluation in our sample and how the pattern of interventions evolved over time. As I noted, the early literature was dominated by conditional cash transfers, largely in Latin America, unconditional cash transfers, as well as bundled interventions, including livelihoods components, began to increase more rapidly between 2000 and 2010. Next slide, please. So I will briefly summarize our key findings. We are focused on assessing the effects of transfers normalized vis-a-vis the transfer amount, and that would be the total transfer amount that a particular household would receive over the program lifetime. Our main estimates suggest that a $100 transfer leads to an increase of between $1 and $2 in monthly consumption and income at the household level, and this effect persists on average for about 2.5 years. That's inclusive of the program period and typically some period post-program that is observed. I should emphasize we cannot rule out longer-term effects, but the vast majority of the evidence that we're drawing on does not assess programs on a long time horizon. There's no evidence of any effect on the probability of labor force participation. Thus, transfers are not discouraging recipients from working, but nor are they leading to an increase in the probability of working. We do see that effects are meaningfully larger, roughly double, if cash plus interventions are implemented in conjunction with livelihoods interventions such as training and savings groups. We don't see any evidence that these effects are different in fragile settings. So as I noted, we have relatively limited sample. Next slide, please. We anticipate that these estimates can be useful to inform decisions around transfer size. And to illustrate this, we did an indicative exercise where we used data on the Poverty Gap Index in a selection of countries. What I'm showing here is just a subsample. The Poverty Gap Index is constructed by the World Bank and summarizes for poor households in different countries how far below the $1.90 extreme poverty line are households on average. Using that poverty gap data and our estimates of the effects of transfers on consumption, we estimate what the cumulative transfer required would be to lift these households to the poverty line, but not beyond it. And you can see that in the third column, and then what the monthly transfer required would be if that transfer was distributed over roughly 2 years, which is the typical program design we see in our data. The last column summarizes the year of the PIP data. You can see generally this is quite recent data. We conduct this exercise to indicate that the monthly transfers required to bring households to the poverty line in some cases, such as Bangladesh, are not large, but in Sub-Saharan Africa are generally quite large and larger than the typical transfer size that is seen in many government social protection programs. That's not to suggest that smaller transfers won't have positive effects. They will. A transfer of any size could potentially have positive effects. But it's important to temper expectations about the effects of a smaller transfer, given the evidence we have about what would be required to bring households to the poverty line. Next slide. Just to briefly sum up, we suggest that cash transfers have a range of positive effects on household livelihoods outcomes in both fragile and non-fragile settings. There remains a notable evidence gap in fragile settings that this initiative, among many others, may contribute to fill. Cash plus interventions have even larger effects, but in general, the transfer magnitude required to fully close the poverty gap for households below the poverty line will remain large, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa. I will close there. Thank you so much for the time, and I'll pass to Ellen de Brauw.
Thank you, Jessica. My name is Alan de Brauw. I'm a senior research fellow in the Markets, Trade, and Institutions Division unit at IFPRI, and I'm going to talk about considering the relative benefits and costs of anticipatory action. Next slide, please. So I want to start with a thought experiment. We know that in our thought experiment, we want to think that we have a specific budget for an impending shock. And I'm really going to put this in the context really of El Nino last winter over 2023, 2024. And we know that El Nino tends to create droughts in Southern Africa. So we can think of doing one of two things with that budget. We can spend it on anticipatory action, and then we can think about whether we can monetize the benefits of spending it on anticipatory action, particularly relative to maybe spending that budget in a more traditional way, which would be with post-shock aid. So we'd wait until the shock had been realized, the drought had taken over, and we have that same budget, so we could essentially use that budget on the same people. So what we want to know is really, are there benefits to doing anticipatory action? Well, we hypothesize that there are benefits to spending that money ahead of the shock, but we also want to think about the specific costs. And that's what we're going to do in this research, which is a little bit of a different question from what are the returns to anticipatory action, because that really engenders the same question, what are the returns to doing post-shock aid? So in a sense, what we're asking is, what do donors buy by providing the anticipatory action rather than post-shock aid? Now, anticipatory action is being used in a number of different settings, not just drought, but floods or in context of cyclones. But we're going to really try to focus here on that drought for the purposes of this this talk. Just to note, this everything I'm going to talk about is backed up by a theory model. So we've written this down as an economic theory model as well. Next slide, please. So the theory model really identifies two classes of benefits, or potential classes of benefits, and one potential cost. So we're going to think about the anticipatory action group on the top of the timeline, which is in the middle, sort of in the middle of the slide, and the post-shock aid in the below the timeline. The two types of benefits are, we have a small green box and a longer green box. And what we can think of is that the shorter green box, or the smaller green box, is the benefit in the short term. So that anticipatory action can protect the food security of beneficiaries during the shock in the short term. So that's one benefit that we want to count up. And a second benefit is that anticipatory action beneficiaries can benefit from either themselves protecting their assets or the program protecting their assets through improving watering, water availability for livestock, for instance. So the anticipatory action beneficiaries have these two different classes of benefits, the short-term and the long-term benefit, which can be caught up. The non-beneficiaries can catch up, but they would have a hard time doing that over time. And then the cost anticipatory action it relates to potential mistargeting. Obviously, weather forecasting is forecasting. It's not exact, and we might forecast that a drought would occur in a specific region, but depending upon the size of the group of people that can be reached by anticipatory action, it could be that the drought hits a slightly different area. Alternatively, the drought might not be as bad in some areas as one might expect a number of months out. There are some things we can do with infrastructure to improve that possibility, but we're going to leave that for now. On the other hand, if there's no anticipatory action, we note that living standards deteriorate during the shock, assets can deteriorate or be even lost to the shock, or you might have to sell them to keep your living standards up. But that said, the targeting is relatively improved. We're not going to give money, for instance, to or give money or other aid to people in areas that don't actually realize the shock. And then we assume that the post-shock aid group has their food security recover following the aid transfer. Just to think a little bit more about those costs, on the next slide, we show some potential, we illustrate some potential curves. So if we think about the y-axis is the proportion of people who get mistargeted, and the proportion of the affected population that is targeted is on the x-axis. So essentially, we're hypothesizing that this relationship is quadratic, or it increases at an increasing rate as more of the affected population can be targeted. However, we don't really know the curvature of this. Don't really know. We don't know the curvature of this relationship because the countries that we studied are all in that 0 to 10% affected population receiving anticipatory action in the 10% group. Okay, next slide, please. So what we do is we then use data collected by WFP to fit the model, and these are basically cost benefit analysis of the additional benefits to anticipatory action in 3 countries that had anticipatory actions in the El Nino event. They're 23, 23, and 28% for Madagascar, Mozambique, and Lesotho, respectively. And we lay this all out in a couple of papers that we're publishing as part of papers and briefs that we're publishing as part of this project. I just want to, before closing, thank the Southern Africa Regional Office of WFP. We've been working closely together on this study. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Peter.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, my name is Peter Läderach, and I work for the Alliance of Bioversity International and CIAT, one of the CGIAR centers, and I co-lead the before mentioned Fragility, Conflict and Migration Initiative. And I'm going to talk a bit about some of the capacity sharing and knowledge exchange activities. Next slide, please. So you may all be familiar with like search capacities, so seconding people and staff to institutions. So for example, the standby partnership that the UN has. In those contexts, more hands are being deployed to help in crisis. But here what we were trialing basically is bringing our researchers to WFP to work with them. So not only more hands, but also additional or new evidence through secondments. And so as you can see on the right-hand side, it is like a formal setup. So our staff has been deployed to, in this case, 2 regional offices, the regional bureau in Nairobi and the regional bureau in Johannesburg, with clear terms of reference and everything. So the advantage, so I've been myself seconded to WFP for some years, and that's why I really like this setup. Because those colleagues, they were embedded in both institutions. So the colleagues were only seconded half time, 50%, so that they could truly leverage our expertise and our science into WFP on a daily basis, on a needs basis. And it's very important to be embedded in the other institutions because, of course, CGIAR and WFP are both not exactly easy to understand organizations, big organizations with national, regional, and global activities. So through those part-time secondments, they achieved like a deep understanding of the operations that could respond adequately. So you can see also that it was very demand-driven, agile, and real-time collaboration. So this little circle there shows a bit the approach that we deployed. So identified evidence gaps, then gathered data, started analyzing, sharing, discussing, and then starting not from scratch, but like on a higher level again to improve the analysis. And so this has been a super beneficial setup, and it continues. We did this before, and it still continues. And so now a couple examples, next slide, of what the actual secondis have produced. So as we nicely heard in the introduction, nowadays, of course, it's all about climate, conflict, economic shocks, health, but compound, right? So the crises are very much compound and complex. So that's why, of course, often, as Arif nicely said, we need to understand the problem to then develop the solution. So if those problems are so complex, then sometimes the solutions also have to cater to different objectives. And so through the Fragility, Conflict and Migration Initiative, we developed this Climate Security Observatory and the Climate Security Sensitivity Tool, which are tools that allow us to operate, program, and inform policies in those complex and compound crisis situations. So to bridge the humanitarian development peace nexus, so to make climate investments conflict sensitive, or humanitarian interventions also contribute to climate adaptation. And so concretely, we supported several countries. So we assessed the climate security sensitivity of WFP's foreign policy instrument Nexus project in Tillabéri, Niger. We mapped the climate security for targeted humanitarian and resilience WFP interventions in Mali. We assessed the climate security sensitivity of WFP's communal participatory planning project in Burkina Faso. So very, very concrete examples where we were able to contribute. And so the nice thing is now of course, this funding now is over, but the collaboration continues. So the next secondment now will look into supporting the cadre harmonisé, so to bring the climate peace and security nexus together and work with WFP and the other partners in the Sahel, in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso on this nexus. And with that, I hand over to Wolde. Thank you.
Good morning. Good afternoon, all. And my name is Wolde. I work for the International Water Management Institute. And today I will just briefly talk the importance of how co-developing project initiatives and its their implications for research use and benefits, and also talk a little bit about how our knowledge products are currently supporting WFP's resilience programs. Next slide, please. So our project implemented in the Somali region of Ethiopia and covers 2 districts, Bokolmayo and Dolo Ado, and this district borders Somalia and Kenya. And this area is mainly characterized by frequent crises and vulnerable livelihoods due to weather extremes such as droughts and floods. So to address this societal challenge, we developed a number of projects. Please, next slide. So we just to address this key societal challenge, that's drought and flood, and build resilient communities and environments, IWMI, WFP, and collaborative stakeholders co-designed and implemented multiple research for development activities. Our activities covers diverse topics and thematic areas, for example, stakeholder mapping and analysis, identifying knowledge and skill gaps in water resource management, and also identifying how to use local ecological knowledge and also the drivers of livelihood shift in the study area, and also mapping and identifying nature-based solutions for building resilience and also environmental sustainability, flood mapping and also flood management, and also capacitating local level practitioners. These are the different thematic areas of research for development activities we co-designed and co-implemented with WFP, collaborative stakeholders, and multiple government sector offices. Next slide, please. So this work has just generated a number of knowledge products, and in each of these knowledge products, there are contextualized and actionable evidence. Particularly, our knowledge products informs how to integrate nature-based solutions in resilience programs and food security programs, for example, and also informs how local ecological knowledge can be used during the planning and design of resilience programs, and also identified the skills and knowledge gaps in water resource management and how to address also those gaps. It informed flood mapping, flood management, and also capacitated local capacity so that we can properly plan and implement diverse resilience programs. Next slide, please. So our research currently being used in many ways by WFP, collaborative organizations, and government sector offices. Just to give you 3 examples, for example, one way of just our products are used by WFP, for example, in designing appropriate interventions in the affected communities. At the moment, WFP is making some kind of reconnaissance survey to expand irrigated agriculture and also water harvesting structures. They are using our knowledge products, particularly how to integrate nature-based solutions in the design of irrigation and water capturing systems. This is one example. They are also using our knowledge products in developing innovative project proposals. I can give you 2 examples. For example, at the moment, WFP, in collaboration with different stakeholders, developing the Mandera Triangle Climate and Resilience Project. All the inputs they are getting from all diverse our knowledge products, and also in each knowledge product, we suggested a number of recommendations, focus areas to really effectively build the resilience of communities and environment and also achieve the desired goals. So the other example is now WFP is initiating a dike for every village initiative, and this is mainly linked or related with our knowledge product. Now they are also adapting training materials because in our region, there are a lot of capacity building activities are going on. Now, because of this generated knowledge products, now currently they are adapting their training materials and also to provide a targeted training and also address identified skills and knowledge gaps in resource management, irrigation water management, and also in building resilience, disaster risk management, and many, many areas. Next slide, please. So do we need sustaining this partnership? Yes. For example, one of the agriculture office in the Dolo Ado in our study areas mentions that the first thing that is missing is more research. We need studies on where to build, where to close areas, and where to divert water. Constructing infrastructures like dikes, for example, requires comprehensive research and surveys. So we need to know what to do and where to do it, but this kind of research has not yet been conducted in our area. So our partnership with WFP also witnessed the importance of generating evidence and also better plan, design, and implement resilience programs. So evidence generation is key for facilitating development, so that it's really good to sustain this kind of partnership and also do a broader and bigger studies and also cover larger areas. Next slide, please. Just to suggest a few things the way forward. For example, the key finding is the need for increased investment in climate resilient water infrastructures is the key just findings that we got. So one of those climate resilient infrastructure is nature-based solutions such as water harvesting structures. But designing, implementing, and scaling nature-based solutions requires the development of joint initiatives based on the body of evidence generated so far. For example, to give you one example, the example of dike, for example, WFP uptake just our recommendations. Now they initiate dike for every village concept. By 2025, they targeted 33 villages. But if you really collaborate, both the donors, knowledge organizations, and development organizations collaborate together, and if you can scale up this kind of initiatives to all 95 districts, we can really benefit 8.2 million people so that we can have sustained environment, resilient communities, and also food secured community. So as a way forward, also, we need to really capacitate and work building the capacity of local practitioners, because we need local capacity to effectively implement, design, and monitor and evaluate any kind of resilience programs that just anticipate to achieve food security or a resilient community or a resilient environment. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, Dan, Jessica, Alan, Peter, and Wolde for helping us scope this important project. We're running a little bit behind. We'll want us to get to important panel discussion and the question and answer session. We'll now move to our panel discussion that will be moderated by Sandra Ruckstuhl, Senior Researcher, IWMI. Over to you, Sandra.
Hi, can you hear me well enough? I hope so. Yes, you're nodding. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who's presented so far. There's a lot of really fascinating research and the discussion now moving to the application of that and the partnerships that have facilitated all of this work. So I would like to just emphasize, as was just referenced, we have limited amount of time, but some really important insights to share from our panelists. So I will now go through an introduction of those individuals. I'm going to ask that as we go through the questions for these panelists, that we please stick to time so that we may have a little time for the Q&A at the end of this webinar. Of course, I've told you, the panelists before, but when I show you this card, please wrap up what you're saying when I show the orange card, and your time is really up when I show you the red card. We want to do this so that we have enough time to hear from all of the voices and all of the areas of expertise that have joined us today. So with that, who do we have here on the panel? And if you could please turn on your cameras as I share your names. So we have Adeyinka Timothée, who is the Vulnerability Analysis and Mapping Officer from the World Food Program in Nigeria. We have Serene Philip, the Social Protection Specialist from the World Food Program in Somalia. We have Lynette Ochuma, Deputy Director of Sustainable Development from the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection in Kenya. David Kamau, the Program Officer from World Food Program in Kenya. And then Christiane Grassini, Head of the Climate Change Adaptive Food Systems Unit at WFP in Mozambique. So a nice range of geographies joining us here with a variety of experiences on all these different research activities. So with that, I'm going to dive right in first with you, David. Now I should be splitting my screen so that I can see if you're nodding at me and you know what's going on. Okay, so here we go. So the first question for you, David, I'd like to ask you, you've been deeply involved in WFP's social protection projects in Kenya. Reflecting on the collaboration with CGIAR, what have been the key achievements of this partnership, and what can we learn from that? Were there any challenges in aligning strategies between partners, and how were these overcome? Over to you, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Some few highlights from our own experience. First of all, is to appreciate the comparative advantage of institutions that have come together to make this possible. The donor community, the UN, research, the CGIAR, and of course under the leadership of the government. Two main points from my end, given the limited time. One is that we are looking forward to building a credible body of evidence on what is exceedingly useful within Kenya's context, especially because of the challenges posed by climate change, deepening vulnerability, among others. And these I put across in reference or in regard to the protective and transformative nature of the economic inclusion program or the adaptive social protection program, which I believe my colleague Lynette from the government of Kenya will be talking to more. So I think one on this is on building of credible evidence that then should be in the coming days, in coming times, will be the foundation that will most likely impact policy and programming landscape significantly on what matters most for the most vulnerable populations in places like Kenya. On your second part of the question, on what challenges we might have faced, I think it's important to also highlight that we anticipate challenges and they help us to grow and even have better innovative solutions. But I can also say that this opportunity came or availed itself when we actually needed it most, both from the government side, the WFP and also CGIAR. There was a need, and at the local level, together with the government, we were asking ourselves, how do we fill this in? And it happened that CGIAR, courtesy of the support that they received from Norad, just came at the right time. And that's why we've been undertaking the impact evaluation of economic inclusion program. So sometimes this will be more automatic, like it has happened it happened in Kenya, but there are times when there will be challenges. So I wouldn't delve into challenges more. But what I would conclude by saying is that there's still room for building on this particular foundation going into the future and supporting communities more. Thank you, and back to you, Sandra.
Thank you so much for that, David. Important words to begin with about the importance of the partnerships to frame the demand, frame the problem, and to facilitate the knowledge development that's occurred through the course of these collaborations. So thank you very much for that, David. I'm now going to move over to Christian. Can you please, Christian, tell us if you could share with us your experience about working with the CGIAR colleagues in Mozambique. What are some of the innovations and areas of work that you are co-developing to support the government in that country? Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. So, under the framework of the long-term agreement that WFP has with CGIAR, here in Mozambique, WFP has identified entry points to establish a country-based cooperation with the objective to promote some key points of our approaches in the country and streamline the scientific basis for an efficient and effective implementation. In particular, WFP Mozambique is cooperating with the CGIAR in the promotion of the ecosystem-based adaptation in the country as per agreement with the government. And under this in particular, the two organizations are working on carrying out ecosystem service studies in various parts of the country with the aim to support the definition of either sub-basin management plans or local adaptation plans as part of the government of Mozambique strategy. In addition to that, an ecosystem service studies serve also to identify priority natural-based solutions that the WFP and the government can implement under the framework of specific ongoing or upcoming projects. As in addition to all that, WFP and LTA are also focusing on the northern province of Mozambique, Cabo Delgado, that we, most of us know, has been for many years one of the most economically marginalized provinces of the country and has become the most fragile one since 2020, when non-state actor groups have emerged and insecurity has increased, leading to a huge number of IDPs and disruption of most of the economic and livelihood activities. So WFP for Cabo Delgado has developed a strategy to lead the transition from humanitarian assistance into climate resilience building. Such a strategy aims at promoting a just women/youth-centered transition through the promotion of the water, energy, food, and ecosystems nexus, the WIFI nexus, as well as with engaging in the public-private producers partnership, the 4Ps. This is expected to improve people's livelihood and create economic opportunities, hence decreasing the risk of youth, mainly youth, being attracted by illegal opportunities. At the same time, the approach aims at strengthening the inter and intra-community socioeconomic links, hence reinforcing social cohesion and contributing to the humanitarian development peace nexus. Under this framework, WFP and CGIAR partnership aims at contributing to efforts of the government of Mozambique on the stabilization of the province of Cabo Delgado by designing and implementing environmental peace-building solutions that encompasses the participation of all segments of the society, addressing some of the specific drivers of fragility in the area, hence promoting long-standing stabilizations and peace. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Christian. An extremely dynamic situation in Mozambique, of course, that you're designing a very ambitious set of interventions for. So thank you for sharing all of that with us. Moving north a little bit to Somalia. I guess it's just the nature of fragile and conflict-affected situations. They are inherently dynamic, but moving to Somalia and the situation there. So, Serene, in these types of fragile settings like Somalia, partnerships are crucial, but they also should allow for a reasonable level of flexibility in order to address emerging issues and needs. So WFP has worked closely with the CGIAR, as well as with the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs of Somalia. In what ways were those co-produced knowledge products useful and applicable to WFP and to the government's programs? Over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a huge learning curve in Somalia. As you mentioned, it's a fragile context. For Somalia, one of the key things has been for WFP implementing the national safety nets on behalf of the government. So the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, the key ministry, taking a lead in implementing the national safety nets. And it was for the first time that such a huge program was being undertaken. It was the aim was to reach 200,000 women, that's 1.2 million individuals all across the country, and it was a nutrition-sensitive program, trying to reach mothers with children under 5. Now, you can imagine in this program, for it to be nutrition-sensitive, there was a huge demand for services. This study would be extremely important to inform government going forward. So this study has contributed to MOLSA, that is the government's knowledge on designing safety nets, cash transfers to the most vulnerable people who are hit by recurrent shocks. You must remember that on top of the fragility, which is conflict affected, also you have climatic shocks, recurrent climatic shocks. So studies like this is extremely important where we do not have sufficient knowledge pieces to inform us. So it's extremely relevant. Going forward, the government is designing its own program. So research like this, I can't understate how important it is. So thank you, and back to you. I hope I've kept my time.
Thank you very much for Serene for sharing that with us. A reminder of the complexity of these compounding issues of climate change and conflict. So we're going to be moving across the continent to Nigeria. Adeyinka, I'd like to ask you some questions. Of course, in Nigeria, situation also dealing with these complexities, and in the context of your partnership with the CGIAR, looking in particular at parts of the country which are hosting large numbers of displaced persons. So Nigeria faces these complex climate challenges and a highly challenging security situation. So how has the CGIAR and WFP partnership in the country helped to improve our understanding of water system risks in particular and vulnerabilities in the country and in particular in the state where the work is being done? Over to you, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Sandra. So I think like you said, in Nigeria, we face a multiple array of conflicts, from conflict, banditry, economic shocks, and climate change has actually also has made the list. And more recently, flood, as it were, is a major risk in Nigeria. It's a big concern, for us in Nigeria, and due to the consequences of the destruction of farmlands, properties, lives, and so. More recently, I think in September, we had a major flood that, impacted several locations where even we work. So we had about, over 150 something hectares being destroyed. Then we also had about 93,000 hectares of cropland, being destroyed. So indeed, the pressure on natural resources has increased due to some of this, demographic growth and all. So speaking of our study, we had a study with just early this year with the International Water Management Institute, which was very, very useful. And, the study presented the detailed analysis of the water vulnerabilities in local governments in Adamawa. So Adamawa is one of the states in Nigeria, an administrative location where the impact of conflict has actually been felt. So this study helped us to understand the interplay between the adaptivity, sensitivity, the exposure to risk on waterways. And for us, from this study, it helped to contribute to understanding some of the key factors that contribute to some of these water vulnerabilities, and helped us with some of the nuanced understanding of how these vulnerabilities, the interplay between the vulnerabilities, demography, and also environmental factors, and of course the livelihoods of the people. This was actually quite instructive. And I will say, just also for our partnership with SIGA, and this is how important it is. We did a formative decentralized evaluation, which helped us in reshaping and really, getting to design our current CSP. So I'll stop there for time's sake. Thank you so much. And back to you, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Adinka. I wish we had more time to hear about everybody's experiences and still covering more research, new examples that all of these partnerships can explain. So I'm now going to move us over back to Kenya. Lynette, it's critical that we hear the voice of the government, as we go through these discussions about the value of this partnership, the utility of this partnership. So you have played a critical role in the trilateral partnership between the government of Kenya, CGIAR and WFP, with the objective of informing the scale up of social protection and livelihood programs in the country. How do you plan to use the evidence and impact evaluations that were conducted by WFP and the CGIAR teams to achieve impact? Over to you.
Thank you so much. We've had a great partnership with CGIAR and WFP. We've been working together, and I think it's a good example between what we can have in terms of collaboration between the private and government. So we've been working together, and thanks also for giving me this opportunity. Now, in terms of how we are going to use the evidence, the evidence that we've gotten from the research that we've been doing together is that we are able to enhance our social protection policies. We've been able to refine them based on the tangible evidence that we got. And it has also helped us in terms of targeting, ensuring that we target the vulnerable populations that based on the evidence that we have received. It has also helped us in terms of resource mobilization from the tangible evidence that we've received from the evaluations that we've been able to do together. This has helped us to get more funding of our social protection programs. Now, specifically to the question that you've asked about how we are going to use this, this will also help us in terms of getting real-time data. And the real-time data will help us in enhancing our programming, and it also helps us in coordinating our activities. It has also helped us in terms of leveraging on institutional capacity. WFP has really built the capacity of the government, and even through collaborating with IFPRI, we've been able to do the evaluation together, and the government officers were able to really learn from the partnership that we were enjoying together. It has also helped us in terms of even refining our programming in terms of having a clear shared objectives. You'll realize that we have common goals. We all want to reduce poverty. We all want to enhance food and nutrition security. So this has also helped us to have co-creation in terms of developing our objectives and developing our goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Lynette. I am mindful that we are moving along on the time, and we do want to give everybody on the panel the chance to answer the questions that we prepared in advance. So, but if you could please, let's keep it to our main points. I'll try to flag you a little bit earlier if I can. So the last round of questions, Serene. Looking ahead, what strategies should be adopted to strengthen partnerships between organizations like the CGIAR and WFP to effectively operate in fragile settings? How can these collaborations ensure that resilience-building efforts in Somalia contribute to both short-term relief and long-term peace building? Over to you, Serene.
Thank you so much. Again, I think I'll split your question into two parts. The first on strategy. I think when it comes to strategy, it is extremely important for a country like Somalia, who's transitioning from the support that WFP has been providing to a leadership role. So that transition is extremely important, where WFP comes in to provide any research, any technical information and background in developing a very well thought through social safety net programs like nutrition sensitive, very specific to Somalia. So when it comes to strategy, I think that's the important part. Operational research would be a great way to forge ahead in these tripartite agreements or partnership between IFPRI, WFP, and the government. That would be key. The second issue that we really need to think through next time round is building on a cross-ministerial partnership. So cross-ministerial meaning Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, Ministry of Health, federal government, and subnational government. So that would be quite important. On the second part of your question, both on short term and long term, it would be important that programs are well designed so the benefits reach the mothers in the short term, and in the long term for supporting governments to scale up. So that I would say is more going towards the long term. So I see your card. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you, Serene. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Christian, back over to you. Looking ahead and based on the lessons generated through the joint work with CGIAR, what do you see as key areas of need for expertise, particularly related to livelihoods and nature-based solutions in conflict-affected areas? To you. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandra. So let me start mentioning a very important piece of work that was completed recently, which is the systems analysis of fragility in the northern province of Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. For this analysis, CGIAR supported WFP in highlighting three main critical issues. First, the analysis shows how Mozambique has been particularly exposed to climate hazards and conflicts over the past 3 decades, and how the climate hazards are expected to increase to an extreme level by 2040, so in 15 years. Second, by performing a conflict sensitivity analysis with a special focus on Cabo Delgado, we have emphasized the severity of conflict impacts and exposure in this region and the need to dive deeper and understand how to incorporate peace building into adaptation strategies with a focus, of course, on vulnerable communities. And finally, using a compound risk framework, we now have a greater understanding of the drivers of instability in the region and the need to focus on nature-based solutions that are peace responsive and build social cohesion. Now, based on this piece of work that I've just briefly outlined, I would like to briefly mention our plan, the plan for our partnership for 2025. We would like to focus on 5 work streams. Conflict sensitivity integration, where CGIAR can help WFP in understanding and mapping the intersection of climate impacts and local conflict dynamics. Gender sensitive approach, where CGIAR expertise in gender sensitive agriculture and livelihood programming can enhance WFP's efforts by identifying gender-specific vulnerabilities related to climate and conflict impacts, and capacity building for local partners by delivering trainings on climate-smart agriculture and conflict-sensitive programming. CGIAR will help strengthening the capacity of WFP staff, local partners, and target population as well. And then the fourth one will be, as already mentioned in my first answer, the ecosystem service studies. We believe the ecosystem service flow will enable the design of effective strategy for sustainable ecosystems management through integrated water resource management and improved use of natural resources. And then the last but not the least, food and nutrition security, where both organizations explore possibilities of partnering to contribute to improve food and nutrition security, targeting the most vulnerable communities in provinces of Mozambique with high levels of malnutrition. In particular, potential synergies have been explored to include efforts to scale up production and consumption of biofortified beans, targeting school children through our school feeding program. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you very much, Christian. Okay, we have 9 minutes left in our webinar. So Adinka, David, and Lynette, I am going to move through these questions a bit quickly. Adinka, my next question for you is looking ahead and based on the experience working with the CGIAR colleagues, what types of efforts should be adopted to strengthen and resilience of water and land systems in conflict-affected communities in Nigeria? If you could please provide us your high-level priorities.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Sandra. And quickly on that, I think, to respond to your question, I think if strengthening anticipatory action, I think it's a good way to go. Through flood forecasting, I just gave an example of the recent flooding we had, and early warning systems to mitigate flood impacts in Nigeria. This is one. Then Peter mentioned something about climate security lens. So I think it's, plugging this into the cadre harmonisé, which really gets to help us to, understand vulnerabilities, at the geographical level, and also links to what the government is doing, I think is actually a good way to go. Then, of course, then also real good research and operational, research that helps policy makers to implement integrated and sustainable, water management solutions in some of these conflict-affected areas where we're working in. Then I think something else we can look into will be, trying to see how to sensitize and, strengthen some of the conflict resolution mechanisms. And again, from the studies, we saw that strong interplay, as regards to the whole dynamics of social, demographic, and environmental variabilities as it plays across. Okay, I'll stop here. I see my card is up. So back to you, Sandra. Thank you.
I hate raising this card. I don't want to raise it because I want to keep hearing what everyone has to say.
We probably have to stop there because we have to also have questions and answer sessions.
Okay, all right, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for an excellent facilitation. And our panelists, we're now coming to the Q&A portion. Please continue to submit your questions on IFPRI.org, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or by using the hashtag AskIFPRI on X. I have several questions already. I mean, I'll read a couple of them and get the presenters really address it. I'll probably name some names. Someone asks, what are the key indicators to measure climate resilience for food security? And Margaret asks, how best would value addition contribute to food security in developing countries like Kenya? There's also a question, can the cost-benefit research from El Nino impacts in Southern Africa inform other less predictable types of shocks in other circumstances or regions? Probably the last one could go to Alan. The first two, Dan, if you could just weigh in very briefly, appreciate it.
Hi, Mulugeta. Sure. So the question refers to food security measurement and different indicators are used. This is actually something that we've been discussing in detail. There's a variety of different measures on food insecurity. One of the most commonly used is FAO's Food Insecurity Experience Scales. We use that quite a bit at IFPRI, but we note that there's a number of other measures out there. And you can, depending on which measures you use, you can get some different results. And given the importance of that outcome, this is an area, I think, really for continued research. So I'm glad it was brought up here. And it's just something that we think also needs continued attention. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Mulugeta, for the question, or for whoever asked the question for the question. The way that we can think about the cost-benefit analysis working for more rapid onset types of shocks is that we could imagine infrastructure investments going in to help people deal with those shocks. For instance, in low-lying areas of Bangladesh, they've built cyclone shelters that you can take your animals and go wait out floods. So floods or other rapid onset events, and those types of interventions have these long-term benefits that we would imagine we would see in the model. So there is a way to adapt the model to those types of events. Yes, thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Alan. A couple of more questions. Dan, I'm bringing you back on this one. How can researchers from academic research institutions get involved in this important project? And probably also, while you're at it, address what policy tools have proven most effective in enhancing smallholder farmers' climate resilience and food security.
Thanks, Mulugeta. On engagement with academic partners, I appreciate that question. It's something we do an awful lot, and we are very serious about. We benefit a lot from our engagement with our academic colleagues, both in kind of country and the local context where we're working, and those around the world. So just encourage people to kind of reach out to those people on the team that you see. We are constantly looking for kind of creating new collaboration arrangements in country. So just really encourage more engagement on that. We'll get to conscious of time, and I want to give Katrina a moment as well for her kind of closing remarks. So could I just pass back to you? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'm also conscious of the time as well. Just before handing it off to my colleague Katrina Kozak, Senior Research Fellow at IFPRI, for her closing remarks and close us out, the recordings of the seminar will be made available on IFPRI channels. Thank you in advance for taking the time to provide your feedback on our post-event survey. We appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us today. Over to you, Katrina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and fantastic if you can share my slide, Mulugeta. I wanted to say what an exciting group this has been. As lead of the CGIAR Research Initiative on Fragility, Conflict, and Migration, I really wanted to commend all of these incredible research teams for what is not just high quality science, but also something that reflects a substantial amount of collaboration and partnership. And I think Dr. Husain said it very well at the outset that this form of collaboration and partnership at all levels and all stages of the research is really what underlies the success of this large portfolio of work. I know that in the coming years in the CGIAR, our research and science agenda is going to increasingly focus on fragile and conflict-affected food systems. We're recognizing the unique vulnerabilities of these systems, recognizing the problems that they face, and also understanding how population trends and other dynamics are increasing rapidly the share of the world that is living in these fragile and conflict-affected systems. These settings need targeted innovations, they need context-specific science, and we really hope that we can continue to embed all of this science and this innovation in partnerships that will ensure maximal impact, maximal use of the resources. We're excited that the CGIAR has a new research program on food frontiers and security. I am part of the interim leadership team along with Joyce Maru and Hampus Eriksson from CGIAR, and we're really hoping that this program will be a strong location for the Fragility, Conflict, and Migration Initiative's work to be picked up. This has several areas of work in this program that you can see on this slide here. A large one of them is fragile and conflict-affected food systems. We intend to continue to look across the phases of crises and conflict and try to understand what can be done to prevent and mitigate the impacts of crises and conflicts, how to best respond to those, how to embed in our short-term responses long-term development objectives and peace creation objectives so that we can work across the humanitarian development peace nexus in solutions, and ways following crises and conflict to stabilize societies, build resilience, and help support programming and interventions and science that will help build stronger communities in the future. Alongside this, we have other food systems that share a lot of commonalities with fragile and conflict-affected ones. We have an area of work in this new program on urban and peri-urban food systems that is really focused on urban food production, livelihoods and job opportunities in urban areas, and what types of interventions can ensure a food environment and an enabling stakeholder environment that can support food security and poverty reduction in these types of food systems. And we're also looking at island food systems. These are places where increasingly climate change is having heavy negative impacts. So looking at how to ensure food safety, adequate access to food, engaging in behavioral change and institutional innovations that can support access to food, and growing innovation hubs and diagnostic frameworks that can help us understand how to promote the CGIAR research objectives of reducing poverty, bringing about gender equality, and bringing about food security in these environments will be increasingly important. Undergirding all three of these fragile food systems, we will have a future food system lab. This lab will be a hub of innovation, including bringing in local innovators. It will have synthesis work across all of these food systems to help especially transboundary actors, but many government and non-governmental partners to identify effective solutions to challenges emerging in these food systems, and really be cutting edge home of science on how to address the challenges coming about. We really hope that our partners, our donors can help support us and get a strong start in this new science program in CGIAR. But I wanted to thank everyone again immensely for what I think all of us should be very proud of the partnership and the collaboration that went into this suite of projects. Thank you so much to the Norwegian government for supporting this. Thank you to the World Food Programme headquarters, country offices, regional bureaus. All of these partners have made this a success. We hope to continue working with you in the next phase. Thank you again.